AITA for calling off my wedding after my fiancé bought a house with his mom. I need to know if I'm losing my mind here because I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. For context, I, 28F, have been with my fiancé, 30M, for 5 years. We were engaged, planning our wedding for this fall, and for the longest time, we had these big, detailed conversations about our future, where we would live, how we would handle finances, how many kids we wanted, and how we'd raise them. We weren't just throwing vague ideas around, we had a whole structured plan. We talked endlessly about saving up for a house, making sure it was something we both loved, and turning it into our dream home together. I really thought we were on the same page. I thought we were partners. But apparently, I was the only one actually sticking to that plan. Because it turns out, he bought a house. Without me. But that's not even the worst part. He bought it with his mother. And he didn't even tell me he was looking. I found out about it in the most casual, throwaway way imaginable. We were sitting together one evening, just going through our usual end-of-the-day conversations, when he suddenly drops, "Oh yeah, so I finalized everything with the house today." I just stared at him, trying to process what he had just said. The house? What house? I thought maybe I had misheard him. Maybe he was talking about an investment or something we had talked about before. But no. He meant an actual house, a place that he had bought. And he hadn't even breathed a word of it to me. So I asked him what he was talking about, and that's when he told me that his mom had found the perfect place and convinced him to go in on it with her because she didn't want to rent anymore. So instead of saving for the home we had been talking about for years, instead of making a decision with me, his fiancée, the woman he was supposed to be building a life with, he decided to financially tie himself to his mother. Behind my back. I cannot even begin to explain the level of betrayal I felt in that moment. And then, as if that wasn't enough of a gut punch, he just casually says, "Oh, well, you can move in too, of course." Like that was supposed to make me excited. Like I was just supposed to be thrilled to live in a house that his mother picked out, that his mother partially owns, where his mother will be living full-time. And the cherry on top. When I asked him why he would do something like this without even discussing it with me, he straight up admitted that he felt like I was taking too long to save up. That his mom offered him a faster way to own a home, so he just went for it. I just sat there, stunned. I felt like everything we had built, everything we had planned together, just crumbled in that moment. Because here's the thing, it wasn't just about the house. It was about trust. About partnership. About making decisions together. How do you go from planning a future with someone to making a major, life-altering financial decision behind their back, and with your mother of all people? I told him I needed space. I left and went to stay with a friend because I needed to clear my head. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't something I could just get over. This wasn't a small miscommunication or a minor mistake. This was a fundamental, relationship-altering breach of trust. This was a giant, flashing neon sign that he would always put his mother first, that he didn't respect me enough to include me in major decisions, that he didn't see me as his true partner. And if that's the case, then what was the point of getting married? So I called off the wedding. And now, predictably, all hell has broken loose. His family is livid. My phone has been blowing up non-stop with texts and calls from his parents, his siblings, his aunts, and even some of his cousins, all telling me that I'm being dramatic, that it's just a house, that I'm overreacting because we can still live together. His mom, the same one who orchestrated this entire situation, actually had the audacity to tell me that I should be grateful because now I have a place to live without having to worry about a mortgage. As if this is some favor she and her son did for me. Even my own parents, who I expected to have my back, are saying that canceling the entire wedding over this might be extreme. That marriage is about compromise. That we could work through it. But how do you compromise with someone who doesn't even see the issue? Who thinks this is normal? Who genuinely believed I would be fine just slotting myself into a home that he bought with his mother? Because if he can make this decision without me, what else is he willing to do behind my back? Will he take out loans without telling me? Make major life choices based on what his mother wants rather than what's best for us? What happens when we have kids? Is she going to have an equal say in how we raise them too? I refuse to be in a marriage where I come second to his mother. Where I have no real voice. where my input and my feelings are dismissed as dramatic whenever they inconvenience him. So, I need to know, am I actually losing my mind? Is this a giant red flag, or am I truly being unreasonable? Because right now, standing in the middle of this absolute mess, I feel like I'm the only one who sees how wrong this is. Update 1. After taking some time to process everything, I knew I needed one final conversation with him. Not to fix things, not to try and salvage the wreckage of our relationship, but to understand. To hear, in his own words, why he thought this was okay. I needed to look him in the eye and see if there was any part of him that understood what he had done. I wanted to see if there was even a shred of remorse, any glimmer of realization that he had completely betrayed me. Maybe, deep down, I was holding on to some last thread of hope that he would acknowledge the sheer magnitude of what he had done. That he would take accountability, that he would show some indication that he was aware of how deeply he had hurt me. That he would act like the man I thought I was going to marry. So I met up with him, my ex-fiancé, for what would be the last time. The moment I sat down, I could already tell how this was going to go. His whole demeanor was off. He wasn't heartbroken, he wasn't desperate to fix things, he wasn't even apologetic. Instead, he looked impatient. Frustrated. Annoyed. Like I had forced him to be here. Like I was wasting his time. There was no guilt, no sorrow, no real emotion beyond irritation. It was as if I was the one overreacting, as if I had turned a small misunderstanding into some kind of huge catastrophe. His expression said it all, he didn't think he had done anything wrong. He didn't think he had betrayed me. If anything, he seemed like he was waiting for me to come to my senses, for me to suddenly realize that I had been blowing things out of proportion. And that was when I felt it, that cold, sinking weight in my chest. That moment of absolute clarity where you just know. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a miscommunication. This wasn't some lapse in judgment that he would come to regret. He had meant to do this. He had made a conscious choice. And now he was expecting me to simply accept it. I asked him, point blank, why he did it. Why he thought this was okay. Why he had spent years talking about our future, our home, our plans, only to turn around and buy a house with his mother without even telling me. And that's when he dropped the bombshell. His mom had been planning this for years. While I had been under the impression that we were slowly but surely saving for a home together, his mother had been whispering in his ear, planting the idea that buying a house with her was the smart financial move. She had been feeding him the idea that I was holding him back with my slow and careful approach to saving, telling him that if he waited for me, he'd be wasting valuable time. She convinced him that her plan was better, that her way was the right way, that I was simply being too cautious, too slow, too emotional about the process. And worst of all, she had convinced him to keep it a secret from me because she didn't want me to ruin it with my emotions. I sat there, my mind reeling, as he said it all so matter-of-factly, like it was just a simple, logical explanation. Like it was no big deal. Like he hadn't just admitted that his mother had been actively working against me, deliberately manipulating him into choosing her over his own fiancée. There wasn't an ounce of guilt in his voice, no hesitation, no recognition of how deeply messed up this was. He wasn't confessing with regret, he was explaining with indifference, as if this was just the way things were. That was the moment everything became crystal clear. This had never been about the house. It had never been about the house. This was about control. His mother wanted to secure her permanent place in his life, to make sure that no matter what happened, no matter who he married or what his future looked like, she would always have a hold on him. She didn't want him to start a life with me. She didn't want him to fully commit to someone else. She wanted to make sure that she remained the most important woman in his life, that she had the power to dictate where he lived, what financial decisions he made, and, ultimately, who he prioritized. This wasn't just about a living arrangement. It wasn't just about a mortgage. This was about making sure that no matter what happened, she always had a say. That she always had control. She had spent years slowly weaving this web, carefully planting the idea in his head, ensuring that when the time came, he would pick her over me. And he had. Without hesitation. Without guilt. Without even realizing that it was a choice that should have never been hers to influence in the first place. And the worst part? He didn't even see it. He genuinely thought he was just doing what made sense. He truly believed that his mother had his best interests at heart, that she was just helping him get ahead in life. He had spent so long under her influence that he couldn't even recognize how deeply enmeshed he was, how she had spent years grooming him to choose her over any future partner. He thought this was normal. He thought this was reasonable. He had been conditioned to believe that his mother's opinion, his mother's approval, his mother's wants came first. And he had spent so long living under that belief that he couldn't even grasp how destructive it was. I knew in that moment that there was nothing left to say. There was no fixing this. No salvaging the years we had spent together. Because this wasn't something we could talk through or compromise on. This was a fundamental, unchangeable reality. He was not capable of choosing me over her. And if he couldn't stand up to her now, he never would. It hit me like a freight train, the finality of it. The realization that the man I thought I knew, the man I had planned to spend my life with, had never truly been mine. He had always belonged to her. He had always been under her control. And he always would be. I stood up, looked at him one last time, and told him we were done for good. I walked away without another word, knowing with absolute certainty that I was making the right decision. The second I left, I blocked his entire family. I wanted no part of whatever twisted dynamic they had going on. I didn't want the guilt trips, the emotional manipulation, the fake apologies that I knew would never be backed up by real change. I cut every single one of them out of my life and focused on moving forward. Update 2. I had put my phone on Do Not Disturb after the initial onslaught of messages from his family, knowing that nothing good would come from reading them. I didn't need to hear their justifications, their pleas, their accusations. I already knew exactly what they would say, how I was being unreasonable, how I was throwing away a perfectly good relationship over just a house, how I needed to understand that his mother was only trying to help. I wasn't interested in any of it. I had made my decision, and I didn't owe them an explanation. But despite my best efforts, curiosity gnawed at me. There was a part of me that needed to see what was being said, to confirm that I hadn't imagined the toxicity of it all. So after a few days, I finally gave in. I opened my social media accounts, bracing myself for whatever mess was waiting for me. And oh boy, was there a mess. My ex's sister had posted a rant, a full-blown, barely contained explosion of frustration that made my stomach turn before I had even finished reading the first few lines. She wasn't talking about me, not directly, but it was obvious what had triggered it. She was talking about their mother. About how she had, finally trapped another one. I read the words over and over again, my hands cold as I scrolled. Because this whole twisted situation, wasn't new. It had happened before. Apparently, my ex wasn't the first man their mother had financially entangled. His dad. The man I had always assumed had just been a normal part of their family, who had seemed fine on the rare occasions I met him. He had been her first victim. He hadn't just lived with her, he had bought a house with her. Years ago, under eerily similar circumstances. She had convinced him it was the best financial decision, played the same game of persuasion, guilt, and supposed logic that she had used on my ex. She had positioned herself as the savior, the one with the better plan, the smarter way of doing things. But once his father was financially tied to her, the dynamic shifted. The house was no longer his, it was hers. She controlled every decision, dictated every change, made sure that nothing happened within those walls without her approval. But that was just the beginning. Slowly, little by little, she pressured him into giving up more financial control. It started with small things, convincing him that it made more sense for her to handle certain payments, certain accounts, that it was easier if she took care of it. But over time, it became more suffocating. More absolute. She used guilt like a weapon, convincing him that any attempt at independence, any assertion of his own wants or needs, was selfish. That he owed her. That she had done so much for him, sacrificed so much, and the least he could do was trust her. And then came the real blow. At some point, when he was too deep to see a way out, she convinced him to remortgage the house. Not for their future, not for some mutually beneficial reason, but to pay off her debts. He did it, whether out of guilt, manipulation, or sheer exhaustion, and that was it. The trap had snapped shut. By the time he realized what had happened, by the time he could see the full extent of how badly he had been played, it was too late. He was financially ruined. Walking away wasn't just difficult, it was impossible. Leaving meant losing everything. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. My ex wasn't just a clueless mama's boy. He was her next victim. She had spent years molding him, preparing him, setting him up to take the place of the man she had already drained dry. She had convinced him that her way was the only way, that she was the only person he could truly trust, that anyone who questioned her motives was wrong, selfish, or emotional. And he had believed every word. He hadn't just chosen her over me. He had never had a choice. She had made sure of that. And if I had stayed, I would have been dragged down with him. Update 3. A month after I had fully cut contact, after I had blocked his entire family and made a conscious effort to move forward with my life, I got a text from a random number. At first, I ignored it, assuming it was just a scam or some telemarketer fishing for a response. But then, just before I deleted it, I saw the preview of the message. His name. My ex. The one I had walked away from with absolute certainty, the one I had shut out completely. I felt an immediate wave of irritation roll through me. He had no reason to be contacting me. I had made my decision. I had severed the ties. There was nothing left to discuss, no lingering questions to be answered. I had built a wall between myself and the mess he had chosen to drown in, and I had no intention of looking back. And yet, here he was, forcing his way back into my life with a message I never asked for. I hesitated. I didn't want to care. I shouldn't care. But I'd be lying if I said curiosity didn't get the better of me. So, against my better judgment, I opened the message. And the second my eyes skimmed over his words, my irritation turned into something else entirely. He wasn't asking for me back, he was begging me to talk. Not an apology, not some grand attempt at reconciliation, but full-blown desperation. He needed help. He needed me to help him. Because, as it turned out, his mother's perfect home was anything but perfect. She had rushed the purchase, desperate to get him locked in before he could change his mind, before he could start seeing the cracks in the foundation, both literal and metaphorical. There had been no proper inspections, no second opinions, no slow and careful consideration of the long-term consequences. Just a frantic push to secure her future, consequences be damned. And now, those consequences were catching up to him. The house was a nightmare. Not just minor inconveniences or small fixes, but major, life-altering problems. There were cracks in the foundation, deep ones that hinted at serious structural instability. Water damage that had been hidden under cheap cosmetic fixes was now revealing itself in swollen walls and musty air. The septic system was failing, a looming disaster that was going to cost tens of thousands to repair. And then there was the mold, black mold, creeping in places they hadn't initially noticed, a silent, toxic presence that was already making the house feel more like a death trap than a home. And guess who was stuck paying for it? His mother, the mastermind behind the entire scheme, didn't have the money to fix any of it. She had pitched this as the perfect financial move, the safest bet, the smartest way to secure his future, and yet, the second things started falling apart, she did exactly what she had always done, she pushed the burden onto someone else. Onto him. But the house itself was just one piece of the disaster. After I left, everything changed. And not in the way he had expected. He had genuinely believed that with me out of the picture, things would fall into place. That life would settle, that his mother would make good on all the promises she had whispered in his ear. That he would feel free, unburdened, relieved of the drama I had apparently brought by refusing to play along. Instead, he was suffocating. He had thought they would be two adults, cohabiting, making smart financial moves together. That he would be able to live his life while she simply occupied another room. But that wasn't what she had wanted. That was never what she had wanted. She wanted control. Over everything. Every single aspect of the house, down to the tiniest details, was dictated by her. He wasn't allowed to decorate his own room without her approval. She criticized his food choices, making passive-aggressive remarks any time he brought home groceries she didn't approve of. He wasn't even allowed to have friends over, she claimed that it was her house too and she didn't want strangers coming in and ruining her space. And then there was the money. She had already started asking to borrow from him, small amounts at first, little things that seemed insignificant on their own. But the requests kept coming. The unpaid bills, the unexpected expenses, the subtle yet persistent push for him to take financial responsibility for their new home. She conveniently forgot payments, conveniently had a reason why he should be the one covering something, conveniently always had an excuse for why she couldn't contribute the way she had originally promised. And every time he so much as hesitated, she guilt-tripped him. She reminded him that she had done this for him, that she had sacrificed to make this happen, that it was his turn to show his gratitude. And the worst part? She had completely shut down any talk of his future that didn't involve her. Whenever he so much as mentioned his long-term plans, his career, the idea of moving out, the life he had once envisioned for himself, she shut it down. Not with outright rejection, not with screaming or demands, but with manipulation. She would sigh, act disappointed, make it seem like his mere desire to leave one day was an insult to everything she had done for him. She made him feel selfish for even thinking about a life beyond her. And now, for the first time, he was seeing it. Really seeing it. The chains she had wrapped around him weren't theoretical anymore. They weren't warnings I had given him, brushed off as paranoia or emotional overreaction. They were real. They were tightening. And he was panicking. And now, in his desperation, he was reaching out to me. His message was filled with frantic words, laced with regret and panic. He wanted help. He wanted a way out. He wanted me to give him advice, to tell him how to fix this, to help him undo the choice he had made. And the final blow? He actually suggested that if I forgave him, we could figure it out together. That we could maybe even get married later on, once things settled down. As if I would ever entertain the idea of stepping back into that sinking ship. As if I would ever take on the burden of fixing the life he had chosen for himself. As if I would ever willingly walk back into the same nightmare I had barely escaped. I stared at the message for a long time, feeling nothing but cold detachment as the sheer audacity of it settled in. Then I blocked him. On the spot. No response, no acknowledgement, no second chances. There was no saving him. He had made his choice.